Well, this is a random review, isn't it? Oh well, so I went over to my good friend's place the other day and he has a huge collection of Blu-rays and DVDs. And so he told me to decide which movie I wanted to watch. As I was brushing past the DVDs and Blu-rays, I noticed Transformers The Last Night. At that point I questioned why the fuck would a sane person own this. I wanted to shoot him at that point but thought to myself, I could watch this and add it to my the worst of the worst movie reviews. I then proceeded to shrug off my anger and discuss as to why he would own this piece of atrocity. So I kept searching and then I found the movie Watchmen. I've never watched the movie until that point. I was too young when it first came out, but it was always on the back of my mind for years, but never really thought of watching it. I did hear a bunch of mixed reviews for this movie, so I decided to pop in this movie. I watched the ultimate cut of this movie, which was 3.5 hours long, so I'm going to be reviewing the ultimate cut without knowing what scenes did not make it in the theatrical cut. Now, before I proceed with my review, this will be a spoiler-filled review, so if you haven't seen this movie, do not proceed unless you do not care about spoilers. You have been warned. So this movie also depicts a lot of dark elements such as rape, kidnapping, prostitution, and gang violence. It is in fact one of the darker comic book movies. So let's first start by a very quick establishment of some of the main characters in this movie. So we have Laurie, Rorschach, Dr. Manhattan, the comedian, Night Owl, and Ozymandias. Now essentially the plot of this movie starts from the early 40s where we get a really long montage of major events that took place, such as the assassination of JFK and the Vietnam War. We also learned that there were uniformed heroes that almost reminded me of the Kick-Ass movies. I really like those movies. Anyways, we jump forward to the mid-80s and the comedian is brutally murdered by a stranger. So the character of Rorschach, who used to be a part of a team along with Dr. Manhattan, Laurie, Night Owl, Ozymandias, and the comedian, decided to investigate the death and suspects it was done by an organization that is out to eliminate the former heroes. Now, one of the subplot that ties in with this movie towards the end is that the Soviet Union and the United States are on the brink of a nuclear war and perhaps starting World War III. So Dr. Manhattan is this overpowered superhero. He's in fact the only superhero of this movie, and he's the reason the Soviets are afraid to attack the United States, hence preventing the war. So eventually Dr. Manhattan has a fallout with Laurie and feels like he doesn't care about the human race, and so he teleports to Mars. Eventually it is revealed that Ozymandias is the one that killed the comedian. So essentially Ozymandias' grand plan is to wipe out millions to save billions. So he releases Dr. Manhattan's OP as shit power to New York that he's been collecting over the years in his tachyon device without the knowledge of Manhattan, of course, and so the city of New York is fucked. Poor New York, always getting absolutely obliterated in these movies. Anyways, the entire world unites because of this, and ultimately Ozymandias was the one who saved mankind from a nuclear war. Dr. Manhattan agrees that the world should believe that he was the one who caused it so peace would last. So Rorschach is the only one that wanted to let the world know, but Dr. Manhattan wants what's best for the human race and is forced to kill his friend. Now, it was a very long movie, but I did my best to condense it as much as possible, so let's talk about the things I liked about this movie. Well, it's rated R. I mean, that does not mean if it's a rated R movie that it's good. We've seen plenty of terrible rated R movies. I'm just saying that Zack Snyder integrated the rated R very well in this movie. I enjoyed the main characters as well, as they had a lot of movie time to develop, over the course of 3.5 hours for the ultimate cut, of course. They were interesting and you somewhat cared for them. The action scenes are excellent, as we've seen Zack Snyder proving time and time again that the commendable things about his movies are the action scenes. No shaky, quick cut editing bullshit as we see in so many action movies these days. I'm talking about you, fucking Resident Evil franchise. Okay, so the plot itself is alright, I suppose, and the antagonist had a pretty good reason to be, well, an antagonist. My favorite character was Rorschach. I just loved the mask that he wore, and also the actor that played him had this deep voice that really was badass. He's also violent as fuck in this movie, and it gets really over the top in some scenes. The relationship between Night Owl and Laurie was fine, but I didn't care much for it. Now, let's get to the things that I didn't like. Now the thing that I noticed is that the direction of Zack Snyder in this movie almost reminded me of George Lucas. Now what I mean by that is George Lucas, whom wrote the screenplay of the Star Wars prequels, thought that visual storytelling was not enough, and so right after something happens, the actors blurt out lines to explain or say it, even though we the audience know what's going on. If you guys are confused, let me just show you a scene from this movie to explain it.
But you're afraid of.
I'm not afraid. You want me to see things your way? Go ahead. Show me. Do that thing you do.
Take your hands off her.
It's a whole long time no see.
Not long enough in my book, Eddie. Get in the car. Now. Are there no depths you won't sink to?
Jesus Christ, Sally. And the guy I talked to his, old friend's daughter.
Drive.
Guy tries to rape you, and years later you let him finish the job? What? Were you drunk or just lonely?
No, not him.
The comedian. Where's your father?
So we know that Laurie's father is the comedian after watching the flashbacks, but instead of letting her just react to that, Dr. Manhattan has to say, "He is your father." I don't know, that just bothered me for some reason. Now there are a lot of flashbacks in this movie, a lot guys. It takes up more than an hour of this movie. There's also a lot of narration from Rorschach's character. Me personally, I prefer the story, to be just told as it is without much flashbacks. I mean, just start from the beginning. Why do you have to integrate tons of flashbacks? I mean, I do understand that for some scenes it's necessary, but this is just a little too much for my liking. Now, another thing is that Dr. Manhattan says he knows what's going to happen in the future and pretty much is aware of everything because he's almost like God in this movie. But why didn't he know that Ozymandias was taking his power to wipe out millions of people? Now, with every Zack Snyder film, there's always some positive and negative aspects, but I'd say Watchmen is one of his better movies. This is definitely one of the more interesting and different comic book movies out there. Compared to the similar movies we're getting today, I definitely recommend checking this movie out if you haven't, to get a different take on comic book movies. So, I am going to give this movie a solid B. Let me know your thoughts on this movie down below. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Ciao!